You're watching TV. The picture on the screen starts to shake. On the table, the forks and glasses rattle, slide, and fall. The window shudders in its frame. Then your phone screams, an earthquake alert, and you drop to the floor and crawl under the table, heart slamming, waiting for it to stop. When it finally does, you file out of the building into the open air, rattled but alive. You had a warning. You had a name for it the second it started. You had a table to dive under and a door to walk out of. Every single piece of that is brand new. For almost all of human history, there was no alert, no word, no all clear. When the ground did that, it did not mean a fault had slipped somewhere deep below. It meant something enormous was alive underneath you. And it had just woken up. Think about what an earthquake actually is, stripped of everything we know now. The most solid thing in your world, the floor of the world, suddenly moves like the skin of a living animal. It ripples, it heaves, it throws stone buildings into the air. If you had never heard the word tectonic, only one explanation fits. Something is down there, something huge, and it is moving. So that is exactly what our ancestors saw. Not a natural event. A body. In the far north, the Norse buried the trickster god Loki alive beneath the earth, chained to a rock, with a serpent fixed above his face so its venom dripped onto his skin. His wife crouches beside him forever, holding a bowl to catch the poison. But every time she turns away to empty it, the venom lands, and Loki convulses in agony, and the whole world shakes. Far to the south, the Greeks pinned a 100-headed monster under a mountain. In India, the world rested on the backs of great elephants, and when one shifted its weight, the ground trembled. And on the islands of Japan, they gave the beast a name. A colossal catfish called Namazu, lying in the mud beneath the whole country, so vast that a single flick of its tail could flatten a city. These people never met. But scattered across the whole planet, human beings looked at the same terror and reached for the same answer. Something alive, something trapped, something down there. It is one of the clearest fingerprints of how the mind works. When something moves and we can't see why, we don't reach for invisible physics. We reach for a someone, a will, a creature with a mood. And when the entire earth moves at once, every nerve in your body screams the same impossible sentence. Someone did that. So what do you do when the thing trying to kill you is a god? You can't outrun the ground, so instead, you bargain. In Japan, they did not simply fear the catfish, they pinned it. The thunder god Kashima was said to hold Namazu down with a huge stone driven deep into the earth, pressing on the monster's head so it could not thrash. That stone is real. At the Kashima Shrine near Tokyo, a rounded gray stone breaks the surface with only about 6 inches of it showing, the rest of it, they say, running down without end. One curious lord once ordered his men to dig it out and find the bottom. After 7 days, they gave up. For centuries, people came to that little stone to pray. Not that the earthquakes would stop, but that the god would keep his grip. But some ancient people did something stranger than bargain with the beast. They learned to listen to it. High in the mountains of Greece stood the most sacred site in the ancient world, the Oracle of Delphi. A priestess sat over a crack in the temple floor, breathed in a sweet vapor rising from the rock, and fell into a trance, murmuring the words of a god. For 2,000 years, it was dismissed as theater. Then, the geologist Jella de Boer and the archaeologist John Hale went looking, and directly beneath the temple, they found 2 active earthquake faults crossing in an X, right under the spot where the priestess sat. Where faults grind together, they heat the rock, and the tar-rich limestone under Delphi breathes out gas. In the spring water beside the temple, the team found traces of ethylene, a sweet-smelling gas that, in small doses, produces exactly what the old accounts describe: a floating, weightless euphoria. The Greeks did not build their holiest temple away from the shaking ground. They built it directly on the fault, because the fault was where the god breathed. The earthquake wasn't only a monster to them, it was a mouth. So was anyone actually surviving these things? More than you'd expect. And they did it by paying attention to something we have almost forgotten how to read: the animals. In the winter of 373 BC, on the coast of Greece, stood a wealthy city called Halikai, sacred to Poseidon, the god the Greeks called the Earth Shaker. 5 days before anything happened, the people watched something they could not explain. The animals began to leave. Not 1 or 2, all of them. Rats, snakes, weasels, beetles, every creeping thing poured out of the city in a living river and streamed toward the high ground as if the earth had whispered a warning only they could hear. The people watched them go, and they stayed. On the fifth night, the ground convulsed, the coastline dropped, and the sea rushed in over the walls. By morning, Halike was gone. The whole city sunk beneath the water. Every soul inside it drowned. For centuries, people half believed it was only a myth. Then the archaeologists Dora Katsonopoulou and Stephen Soter spent decades hunting for it, and found the drowned city buried in the coastal mud, exactly where the old accounts said it fell. In one collapsed building, they found more than a dozen coins scattered across the floor, spilled, and never gathered up, as though someone had been running in the dark and never came back for them. Here is the uncomfortable truth in that story. The superstitious ancients were not blind to the danger. They had a warning system. It had fur and scales and far more senses than we do, and it told them, days ahead, that something was coming. The people of Helike had the alarm. They simply did not believe it, and watching the warning walk right past you and choosing to explain it away is a very human way to die. Only one ancient people tried to turn the earthquake into pure information. In China, in the year 132, a court astronomer named Zhang Heng built a machine no one had imagined. A bronze urn ringed by 8 dragons, each holding a small ball in its jaws, with a bronze toad squatting beneath each one, mouth gaping open. Inside hung a hidden pendulum. When the ground trembled, even too faintly for anyone in the room to feel, the pendulum swung, a lever tripped, and one dragon dropped its ball with a loud clang into the toad below, pointing to the direction the quake had come from. One day a ball dropped, pointing west. No one had felt a thing, and the court laughed at the old man and his broken toy. Days later, a mud-spattered rider came galloping in from the western provinces. There had been an earthquake hundreds of miles away in exactly the direction the dragon had named. We tell ourselves we have left all of this behind. We have plates and faults and seismographs now. There is no catfish, no chained god, no monster in the dark. And then the floor moves, and every one of us becomes, for 1/2 second, an ancient human again. Before a single thought can form, your stomach drops. Your hands grab for something solid, and a cold, animal certainty floods through you. The ground is alive, and it is angry. That reflex isn't ignorance. It's inheritance. It is 300,000 years of ancestors who learned in the worst possible way that the one thing you are built to trust can turn on you without warning, and the ones who felt that terror fastest were the ones who lived to pass it down. You didn't inherit the catfish. You inherited the fear that invented it. One day, you'll be watching TV, or driving, or asleep, and the ground will move again. Maybe your phone will warn you. Maybe it won't. But in that first 1/2 second, before the alert reaches you, before the word earthquake even forms, you will feel the exact thing every human who ever lived has felt, that the floor was never a fact about the world. It was a bet. The oldest bet our species has ever made, placed fresh every single morning without your knowing it, that the ground will hold for one more day. For 300,000 years, the Earth has mostly kept its side of it. And every so often, without warning and without malice, it reminds a handful of us that it never actually promised anything at all.